Hey, what's up, Mortgage Coach and Trust Engine community? I've got a pretty different interview that I've done. Allie is not a loan officer, but she is Gen Z, and she is interviewing Gen Z home buyers, people that are Gen Z renters, people on both sides of home ownership. And I'm gonna interview her right now and just get some perspectives that will help us win with first-time home buyers. I'm very passionate about changing a trend in America. And that trend is that the next generation is waiting longer. Like, they're older and they're waiting longer, and want to try to reverse that trend. Here at Trust Engine, we're providing educational technology to do that. The nonprofit First Home IQ that I recently co-founded with Kristen Messerly is providing education to Gen Z. So Allie, welcome to the community.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, and I'm so excited. I love everything that y'all are doing, both at Trust Engine and First Home IQ. So I'm excited to talk with you today.
Yeah, no, I'm excited too. And guys, full disclosure, I met Allie at the Kentucky Derby a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
We were both guests of Greg Share. And by the way, Greg is doing some incredible things around connecting with Gen Z. I interviewed him a few weeks ago. I'll put a link to that down below. Greg has an entire influencer network at his company. And so there's a lot of good insight in that. So anyways, good to see you since the Kentucky Derby. That was so much fun.
Yes, it was so fun. And I got to be just kind of in the mortgage crowd. And it was so nice to connect with you and your wife and spend some time with Greg. You know, I love everything that NFM is doing. And it was great to just learn more about it. And I got the chance to meet you, and I'm here today. So excited to be here.
Right on. So since this is our first interview, the community probably doesn't know you that well.
Yeah.
Give us a little bit on your backstory and why you're so passionate about this topic.
100%. So I feel like I've told this story a couple times, but for anyone who doesn't know, my mom is in the industry. My dad is also in the industry. I grew up in a second generation household, I like to say. And my mom is still in the industry, very active. And, you know, my kitchen table usually was mortgage acronyms, mortgage terminology, very over my head. And I was always like, I will never be in the mortgage industry, way too cyclical. You know, I was 10 during 2008, and I went to Florida State, go Noles. And when I went to Florida State, I got involved with the professional selling program there. And as I kind of looked around the room at all of the different sponsors or industries that were present, you know, when it came to recruiting top talent and really opportunities post-grad, I realized like the industry that's like kind of funded my entire life, the mortgage industry. You know, my parents have, our household has survived based on 2 careers in the industry. You know, nobody was there. And everyone was like, oh, all growing up, everyone's like, what does your mom do? What does your dad do? I'm like, oh, they help people get in homes. Like, I didn't really understand it. And so now I'm at a college level, I'm thinking about what I want to do when I graduate. And I realized like the mortgage industry isn't at these events. So I remember that was a big takeaway. But then also I didn't want to go into a cyclical industry. So I ended up working for Oracle, selling technology there for a year. And then I went to work for a company called Dell, a very big company. So I went to work for Dell for a couple of months before a good friend, Blake Boss, had called and said, hey, I know you're selling technology. You know a little bit about the mortgage industry. Turns out I knew very little about it now that I'm in it. But so he asked me to come work for Active Comply and help like sell technology. And where I really get passionate about our product and why I feel like I've kind of ventured down this idea of bringing homeownership to Gen Z is Active Comply allows lending institutions, IMBs, banks to utilize social media to reach untouched opportunities, basically. So my thing is, I love social media. When I went to school, I studied it. You know, I studied the impacts of gaining traction on platforms like Facebook, Instagram. Now there's TikTok and a couple of other new platforms. But I think it's so interesting that, you know, this video could go viral, and Active Comply gives institutions the ability to connect with so many more prospective buyers, and not only connect with them, but educate them. And so really where I've driven this idea of passion around homeownership is social media is really going to be a powerful way to connect with borrowers, especially Gen Z borrowers. So really where I've set out over the past couple of months, I've been doing these interviews, surveys with people in my life, because I've been at all these conferences, and a lot of different sessions were around marketing to Gen Z. I know Kristen was at one with me, and she was talking about like some of her research, and everyone was asking her questions. And I realized, I am actually the only 24-year-old in the room. Everyone's talking about their daughter, their niece, their nephew. And so I raised my hand and I was like, I can attest to all the data. I am 24, and this is kind of where I've decided, while I'm getting my feet wet in the industry, maybe I can add a perspective from like the conversations I'm having outside of work. So yeah, I've just jumped into interviewing people in my life about the home ownership process. All my friends call me the crazy mortgage girl because I will be out at the bars, and you got to meet my friend Emily.
Yeah,
I
Emily
brought
was
a friend
awesome.
to the Derby, and she's like, oh my gosh, Allie's working always after 5. We'll be out. And I'm just talking about, because I love it. And I think it's something that our industry could really find valuable, especially in this market. So it's been really interesting to me. And I think education and what you guys are doing both at First Home IQ and Trust Engine to build relationships with Gen Z borrowers is really where I was super interested in learning more about, a conversation and where I can maybe connect with some of the people in your network.
Cool. So let's do this. So first of all, anyone watching this live in Facebook right now, I am checking out comments. If you've got questions for Allie, bring them in. Our bigger audience is in YouTube, so our YouTube channel. And I'm going to be interviewing a lot of folks on this topic, because when you look at the tidal wave, like it is a tsunami coming at us. I interviewed Brian Hale a couple days ago. It'll be in our Trust Engine YouTube channel in a few days. But he showed me a graph that shows, when you add up Gen Z, millennials, and half of X, it's 2.5 times baby boomers. So like the demographics coming into homeownership are undeniable. And so I'll be doing more interviews like this to help anyone that follows me, anyone that uses Trust Engine, anybody that's part of this community, like have a competitive advantage. So here's the next question, Allie. You are Gen Z, and now you are having intentional interviews with Gen Z renters and owners. What do they want from a mortgage professional?
That's such a loaded question, Dave. So really
I know, but we're
where
just
I started.
drifting.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think really the biggest thing is education right now. And I think our generation has a tendency to kind of put their head down and not address conversations because they just don't think they may seem the most knowledgeable, if that makes sense. And really where my awkwardness at the bar, I'm like, hey, let's talk about buying a home. And I'm like, hey, let's talk about this. All my friends are like, my tagline is, do you rent or do you own? Like, and I am always out just trying to learn more about people, because really not until I was at a conference and someone in the industry got stuck at a layover with me, and we were just sitting there, and he's like, all right, gotta ask you, why do you spend so much in rent and you don't buy? And I was like, I don't want to talk about this. I was like, no, don't try to sell me. I was like, I'm in the industry, but I'm not ready for that. Da, 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 da. And he was like, but you don't understand the amount of money that you are putting towards someone else's mortgage. And really not until I let my walls down and let him show me the financials did a light bulb go off in my head, where I was like, oh my gosh, nobody's talking about this. And so that's what really got me involved with like Gen Z and the conversations at Bachelor Wine Night, where I'm like, hey, do we renew our lease? What are we doing when it comes to home ownership? Like, it's really not a conversation. So having our industry really take the reins and making it a point of conversation is something that I think will encourage Gen Z, but also making it digestible content. So I know I talk about social media, and I think that that's kind of where a lot of my terminology goes, but not just content, but in conversations with people, whether it's like a first-time home buyer that's approached you and wants to have a conversation. I did an interview last week where someone said that they were throwing around like all these different acronyms, and all of a sudden they left the conversation and they thought, I don't even want to talk about that anymore because I felt so overwhelmed that I didn't understand it. And so really, I think that creating digestible content, having digestible conversations, and making sure that the borrower doesn't feel overwhelmed, that's really going to help get Gen Z into a home, as well as, articulating numbers and the amount of wealth that can come. I know Kristen, a lot of Kristen Messerly's research reflects like our generation is very frugal and money savvy. So any way to get a competitive advantage financially, I think will be a great way to win business with Gen Z borrowers.
So like showing my screen, this is a rent versus own analysis with a young loan officer. I'm not sure if he's exactly Gen Z. I don't know how old Ryan Weiss is. By the way, is Gen Z up to 24 right now? Isn't it?
Yes. It's 12.
So you're an old Z.
I am. I'm right on the cusp, but it makes it
Okay.
perfect because we can get into it early. We can talk about it earlier.
Yeah. But, in this total cost analysis, this was actually, and I'm pretty sure it was someone in their young 20s, the actual borrower here. And because rates had gone up from the first time they talked to a loan officer, and they were up also historically, like this Gen Z buyer was like, hey, rates were in the 2s and 3s. I don't want to pay 6%. But then Ryan showed him that, hey, you could rent out 2 of the bedrooms of this 3-bedroom house. And if you took, I think it was $625 per room that he could get, if you took that money, invested it in 5 years, you'd have $216,000 in net worth, a combination of that investment and equity versus rent. You don't have any increased net worth other than the money he had sitting in the bank, because he had like 20 grand in the bank. So he's like, okay, you got that 20 grand, but you don't have this equity. So you're saying with Gen Z, particularly going through the numbers like that is valuable.
100%. And one of my interviews that I found got the most traction was one of my friends. She said, and I blurted out in the video because after I told her, I kind of explained a mortgage to her, but she said she needed to have $200,000 down before, saved before she even thought about buying a home. And I said, God. Oh my gosh, you are going to be very old before you have that much money saved. And I ran some numbers. I showed her what an FHA loan or a reasonably, reasonable down payment, how much you could get, right now. And I showed her, I think it was $17,500. And quote unquote, she said, wait, then why don't we all have homes? And I was like, it just takes getting one-on-one conversation with a Gen Z man or woman, and just articulating numbers and showcasing the wealth that they can build. Because really, and I'll share a couple of my statistics from the data I've been doing. So I sent out a survey to 200 close people in my network, asked them if they would help me to, talk about home ownership. And so it ranged between 180 and 200 in responses, but 74% are renting, 6% pay a mortgage, and 21% still live with their family or their multi-generational households. From there, 72% hope to own a home within the next 5 years. So
wait, say that number again. I want to get that.
So the housing situation currently, 74% are renting, 6% own or pay a mortgage, and then 21% live in a multi-generational household with their parents, post-COVID. From that, 72% hope to own a home within the next 5 years. So I think, and 25% within the next 10 years, 3% within more than 10 years, but 0% said that they never want to, 0% said no to home ownership, which I think is amazing, because if you look at any millennial data, it is a little bit more pessimistic when looking at the home ownership process. So I thought that that was a really promising number for home ownership and maybe what our generation thinks about buying a home.
Yeah, no doubt. Just to show a couple data points on that. And then I've got a question from the audience here. We do have some folks watching us live. This data came from a combination of, one data point came from my interview recently with our good friend Greg. He called out that according to realtor.com, 30 million Gen X buyers over the next 5 years. This is a data point from NerdWallet, and it kind of supports what Ali just said, is that 28 million want to buy a home this year. People want to buy homes. Now, by the way, that's not a Gen Z stat. That's just saying, hey, people that want to buy a home. Now, the reality is only 3 to 4 million are gonna buy a home, but more want to buy a home. Now, this came up in an interview yesterday. I had Shayla Gifford we did a whole thing on how to win with first-time home buyers. And she said, and this came from, it was Gallup. It was a Gallup survey just recently, like last month, that said 78% think it's a bad time to buy a home. So between the fact that rates are so high, there's concerns of our house value is going to go down, or rates going to go up, or they're going to go down. Should I wait till rates go down to buy? So, like these are facts. And then this came up with my interview 2 days ago with Brian Hale, who said the next 5 to 10 years are going to be incredible, stupendous. But this is the data I showed you guys, or I just shouted out loud. Like when you look at all of these Gen Z, all of these millennials, some of the like the demographics don't lie. It's going to be really good to be in housing. So with that said, what, like tactically, Greg said to Gen Z is not searching Google that much. They're searching TikTok. They're getting their answers on Instagram, YouTube. Do you validate that? Like, or do you think Gen Zs are using Google? And if they are using Google, how are they using Google?
That's a great question. So I think from that data, the surveys that I was doing originally, I asked which social media platform do you use the most? So this isn't as much Google oriented, but 31% say that they're on TikTok the most, 69% say Instagram, 0% said Twitter, which I thought was interesting based on some of the videos I watched from your YouTube channel. And then also Facebook had 0%. Again, this is only 200 people in my age group that agreed to talk about homeownership. But
so wait, so you've interviewed, just I want to make sure we get that clear. You've interviewed 200 people, like you've had intentional conversations with 200.
That was a survey over Instagram that I sent out.
Okay.
So I sent out an Instagram close friends survey to 200 people that agreed to participate. And 31% said TikTok, 69% said Instagram as their go-to social media platform today. That doesn't mean that they aren't on Twitter and Facebook. It's just like their number one go-to social media platform.
I love
so video, image content, I think is very, very engaging with my peer group.
What's image content? What you just said a term.
So any type of images through Instagram.
Oh, I got it.
So any type of video or image content, because I will say originally when TikTok first came out, a lot of people were hesitant to get on it. And so I think that maybe they still use both, but Instagram more than they would TikTok. I don't know. It doesn't go against any TikTok videos. I think TikTok is kind of replacing Google, like you mentioned. So I told this story earlier in the week. Last week I was filling out my Keurig and it had the descale light on. I don't know, the descale. So I didn't know what that meant. And I was like, I found myself just going to TikTok and saying how to descale Keurig, and I didn't even do it intentionally. And it was not until I was on a call with a client a couple hours later that they said, I keep finding my daughter go to TikTok to Google things. And I said, really? And then I sat there and I was like, I just went to descale a Keurig because I wanted a video of how to descale it. I didn't want to have to read it. It makes you sound really lazy. I'm sorry, I'm not lazy. I just wanted a full representation of how to do the whole Keurig thing. And so I think you bringing up the point, are we turning to TikTok instead of Google? I am a big culprit of that right now. I learned how to, what did I do yesterday? I'm going to New York next week for secondary and I got a new suitcase and I'm trying to learn like most efficient way to pack a suitcase. So there's just different things that I am using TikTok for.
And you're doing that on TikTok. You're doing that on TikTok.
And I think my mom would have used probably Google. She would have been like, oh, like, and I don't know if she would even think about that, but
like boomer. Well, I've been 64, so I'm either like the last year of boomer or an old X. So
you're like me to Gen Z. You're like right
I'm on the cusp. But a lot of folks, they don't even use the computer. They don't, there's so much you can learn. Whereas both my kids, I've got a 24-year-old and a 21-year-old, and like they learn everything on social media. So I think it's a really good point. Takeaway for anyone listening to this. Make sure that if you do want to connect with this generation, you at least need to be pro. You need to look like someone who's trusted and expert. And I'm interviewing enough people that are killing it, and the people that are generating leads with Gen Z, like they're creating valuable content. They're educating on home ownership and building wealth with real estate, and they're doing it on TikTok and Instagram and
Well, and
YouTube.
one thing I do want to add is when I was first getting into my videos, I was like, how do I make this fun and interactive? So I actually went to a park in Nashville, Centennial Park, and I grabbed as many random people as I could that looked like they might be in our age group. I interviewed all the way from an 18-year-old to a 31-year-old. And this was the most surprising thing from the video was the 31-year-old. I said, hey, what do you think the best social media or the most interactive social media is right now for Gen Z? And the 31-year-old was like a millennial, and she was like, what's the video one? And I was like, TikTok? She's like, yes, that's really where Gen Z is, I think. And I was like, so then I go to the 18-year-olds and I'm like, hey, what do you guys think is the most like predominant social media? And without even thinking, all of them go TikTok. Like they didn't even like think twice. So I showed it to my mom, and my mom was like, it's crazy that those 31-year-olds didn't even know what it was called, but the 18-year-olds didn't think twice. So even if you're like getting new to TikTok now, when those 18-year-olds are ready to, talk about home ownership or start looking things up, you're going to be the one with the most content already created and the most reputable person for them to use. So I think if you're not on TikTok or any type of video content creation,
you're not in the game. You're not in the game. Yeah, like you're not playing the game to win. So Jim Clay just made a comment. I don't totally get the question. First of all, he said, glad to see Allie on here. Do you know Jim?
Oh,
Jim Clay?
I think so. I think it may be through LinkedIn, but yeah.
Okay. So he's saying glad to see him. Yeah, what's up, Jim? How does she navigate the haves and the have-nots of her age group that bought before rates shot up versus the ones that had to wait?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I've been asking it in a lot of my interviews that I've been doing. So if you don't follow me on LinkedIn, I do a lot of interviews with people in my life who have either bought a home or are looking to buy a home. And it's so funny because rates just do not concern people in my age group, which some people are like, oh, they're high. The realtor that I interviewed was like, oh, I know rates are high right now. But the two men that I interviewed first, I asked them both about rates, and they were like, if I got in now and they go up, I got in at a good time. If they go down, then I'll refi. And so whoever their loan officer was either really articulated the value like you just showed me, Dave, or, they've done enough independent research to understand the financials behind it. But then compared to my friend who thought she needed $200,000 down, she was like, well, I heard that the market's tough. So it's just kind of sitting down and articulating numbers. And I think the biggest difference between the haves and maybe the have-nots when it comes to interest rates would be education behind the financial decision. So I hope that makes sense. But I think really interest rates are not top of mind. I think people just want to get into a home once they see, especially the data that Dave just showed.
Yeah. Tell me if you agree with this statement. I think, first of all, in all demographics, people think they need a bigger down payment than they really need. And I think in all demographics, people don't really put the pen to the paper. They know, there's a part of home ownership that's just like, oh, I want the picket fence. I want my own home. And I do think that is where the next generation, they want to be mobile. They want to live exactly where they want to live. So they're more focused on that than the, that's success. And they also are like, okay, maybe that will be important to success in my 30s, but they're not thinking that in my 20s. So that's, by the way, with First Home IQ, one of the reasons we made the tagline, own your future, because they may not be thinking that I want to necessarily buy a home right now, but they do want to control their future. By the way, I think that less than 24-year-old Gen Z, like, you want to be in control. You want to own your future. First of all, is that true?
100%. So the interview I'm posting this Friday was with my friend last week. Her name was Charlie. She recommended me to her old coworker who just bought a house. And I loved the conversation I'm going to post this Friday because this woman was just so wanting to be financially independent. And she saw the finances. She'd been listening to podcasts on financial readiness and like what was going to prepare her to be competitive, 10 years from now. So I think that, just her knowledge about finances, that's very not representative because a lot of people don't understand it. But once they do, I think that people will jump on home ownership because being financially ready and just financially competitive, I think, especially as women, and I know Kristen highlighted some great stats when it came to being first time home buyer or single women in the home buying market. That's a huge population out there. Um, Equipping them with the right knowledge and the education behind it, oh my gosh, I think women want to be very independent when it comes to buying a home. And my interview this Friday is very representative of that. So I would definitely agree. I think we want the white picket fence, but we also want to live independently. We want to steer our life in the way we want
You want
it
to own
to
your
be.
future. You want to,
Yeah.
yeah, you want to own it. By the way, you mentioned podcast on financial readiness. How big a deal do you think podcasts are for Gen Z? Because we talked
Huge.
about TikTok, talked about IG, talked a little bit about YouTube, but what about podcasts? Like, where should we prioritize that?
So Dave, I spend about an hour and a half walking a day. Try to walk a mile and a half in the morning, and then I try to walk like 2 to 3 miles in the afternoon. And I usually have my headphones in. And I was trying to find a really good podcast. I'm engaged with the FinLocker. They do a podcast, and I listen to that. But I listen to Robbie Chrisman's podcast, but there aren't that many podcasts out there when it comes to just breaking down home ownership. And there might be, but when I do a quick search on Spotify, mortgage podcast, there's not that many that are going to be full spectrum or kind of digestible content that me as a first time home buyer would want to recommend to someone. So if you find any, share them with me. If anyone out there is like, hey, this is something I'm prioritizing, share them with me. But the interview I'm sharing this Friday, she said that her main source of education came from both social media, her parents, and podcasts. She listened to a lot of podcasts on it.
Social media, her parents, and podcasts. Love that, guys. So Allie, I love the work you're doing. I love your curiosity around this. I love that you're doing interviews. I love that you're using social media to pull next gen. It made me think that we actually need to create a slide of Allie's survey of what next gen wants. I would even push anyone listening to this. This is a community. We're masterminding. So if you're watching the recording of this, let us know down below. If you're watching this on our Facebook group right now, which we've got a lot of people watching on our Facebook group right now, I want you to let us know, what do you think are some of the most valuable people to follow for next gen? And when I'm defining next gen right now, we're talking Generation Z, Gen Z. What do you think they're following? If you know of some podcasts, put that down below. I would push everybody, do your own informal surveys around this. Don't assume anything. I think the nuance that you called out between the what was it? The 20-something-year-old versus the 18-year-old?
The 18-year-old versus the 31-year-old, and just where they turn to for education. I think it was
radically different.
Yes.
And how different do you think it is between the 24-year-old and the 18-year-old? You feel like
that's so funny, Dave, because next week I'm interviewing my 21-year-old brother, and then any of his younger friends that will help, because I think that there will be a huge contrast between me and that 18-year-old even. And so in my research, in my interviews, I want to make sure that our industry is preparing for those 18-year-olds, those people that are coming through high school, because like First Home IQ is doing this initiative around homeownership and education. We do not learn any of this. As a 24-year-old who graduated 2 years ago, I thought I knew way more than I did. And so I think that there's going to be contrast between the oldest Gen Z and the youngest Gen Z. They're 11, 12. So Lord knows what will transpire throughout their high school, college journey. But my goal is really just that someone would have a conversation like I had at the airport with that mortgage professional. Until he sat down and made me put my walls down, I never thought about it. And so my goal with this research is to empower, loan officers, industry leaders, have conversations. And it may be really hard. It may be a long game. I know Greg Shear and I talked about this. Social media might be a long game. I know it could take 100 posts before you see your first tractionable one, but I guarantee you, if you don't start now, you're going to regret it down the line, because I really think that homeownership is something that our generation will prioritize.
Yeah, no doubt. And biggest takeaway for me, guys, is it's never been more important that you're educating the next generation on homeownership. So when new loan officers get in the business, my first advice to them is, create a list of everybody you'd invite to your wedding, and then start with all your renter friends and call up your renter friends and say, you know what, I'm new in mortgage. I need your help. I need to get really good at having this rep versus own conversation. Do you mind if I practice this on you? And you literally create one of these rep versus owns for all your friends. And remember, they're your friends, so they'll do it. They'll go through the process, and what will happen is you'll turn on the light bulbs for some of them. You'll get some deals. And
it's genuine. It's not like
it's genuine, and you'll get good at it. And
I think my biggest content creation suggestion would be like you and we're creating content. We can also repurpose it across all socials. So from a loan officer's perspective, if you've worked with a first-time home buyer and they had a good experience, maybe sit down, like have a conversation. Hey, what was your biggest obstacle? Just talking to them about it, because Gen Z loves any type of content out there on themselves. Sounds bad, but we do. We'll share it. We want to share our wins. And so just creating content so then their network can see that you worked with them, and they'll associate you with homeownership too, because you had a great experience with their friends. So content creation and just like sharing that and success stories, that's the biggest life hack, I think, for loan officers right now. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, you didn't interrupt me. So this has been an awesome conversation. Is there a place, you keep talking about, I'm doing these interviews. Where should anyone that's watching this right now, where should they follow you on social media, and where can we watch some of these interviews?
Yeah, so I think I really just jumped in on LinkedIn. I see a lot of the people in our space doing it, but from these interviews, I'm slowly working in the background to compile some like really good quotes and generate them into reels. So follow me on LinkedIn, Ali Carty, or connect with me. I connect back to everyone, but
Ali with 2 Y's, Ali, or excuse me, 2 L's.
Instagram. Oh yeah, okay. Ali with 2 Y, ALLY space CARTY. And then my mortgage Instagram is Ali Carty Mortgage, and that's really where I'm going to start pushing any reels, big quotes, any good takeaways that I would suggest from the interviews that I'm having. I'll start pushing content there once I feel like I have enough of a library to stay consistent, because consistency is key. So for now, LinkedIn, but within the next couple of weeks, definitely follow me on Instagram, and I have a Get to Know Gen Z TikTok as well.
Ooh, okay. So first of all, forward those over to me after this call, and we'll put those down below, because she gave us a lot. Wherever the social media is, I highly recommend you follow Ali. She is a super smart, incredibly well communicating, and just a great human being. My wife absolutely loved hanging out with you at the Kentucky Derby. And if Kelly Savage thinks you're awesome, then you are definitely awesome.
You guys are the best. And I want to say, one of the things I can't stop thinking about since I got to spend so much time with you, Dave, was just living in an abundant mindset. And I just have taken that away. Like, I really appreciate, outside of just like work talk, like you just are such a happy person. So I'm so glad that I got the chance to meet with you. And I've really taken that since we hung out at the Derby, and I've just tried to live with an abundant mindset, because you and your wife were such a great example of that. And I think I appreciate you, and I'm so glad I got the chance to not only meet you then, but now we're industry friends.
Yeah, no, we're industry friends, and there are not that many like legit Gen Z. There are legit Gen Z influencers, but you are very unique in the fact that you're really interviewing others, you're bringing that content in the industry. So keep doing it. We don't have enough people doing it. I look forward to interviewing you more, and really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Dave.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
If you got value from this, give it a like, ask us questions down below. And if you have not already subscribed to the Mortgage Coach YouTube channel, it's not too late. Get started.
Do it.
All right. Take care, everybody. Cheers.